They say blood is thicker than water, but I've learned that DNA can be thicker than both, especially when it comes to family secrets. My name is Michelle Anderson, and until 3 months ago, I thought being adopted was the biggest surprise of my life. I was wrong. I was adopted at birth by James and Maria Anderson, the most loving parents anyone could ask for. They never hid the fact that I was adopted. It was just part of our family story, like Dad's terrible dad jokes or Mom's award-winning apple pie. Being adopted never made me feel less of an Anderson, at least not until Aunt Karen decided to make it an issue. It started when the invitations went out for the Anderson family grand reunion. Grandpa Anderson was turning 90, and the entire extended family was gathering at his sprawling farmhouse in Vermont for a week-long celebration. Cousins were flying in from across the country, uncles and aunts were taking time off work, and everyone was talking about making it the biggest family event in Anderson history. Everyone except Aunt Karen, that is, as Grandpa's oldest daughter and self-appointed guardian of the Anderson family legacy. She'd taken charge of planning the reunion, and apparently she had some very specific ideas about who counted as family. I found out about her views during a family dinner at my parents' house. Karen was showing Mom the draft guest list, rambling about accommodations and meal plans. "Of course, we'll need accurate numbers," she said, not quite looking at me. "This is a gathering for true Andersons only, blood relatives." The table went quiet. Dad's fork clattered against his plate. "What exactly are you saying, Karen?" Mom's voice had that dangerous edge I rarely heard. "Well," Aunt Karen smoothed her designer blouse, "you understand, don't you? This is about family heritage, about celebrating the Anderson bloodline. Michelle is lovely, of course, but she's not really an Anderson." Not really an Anderson. The words hit like a physical blow. 28 years of family holidays, shared memories, love and belonging, all dismissed because I didn't share their DNA. "That's ridiculous," Dad started, but Aunt Karen cut him off. "James, be reasonable. This isn't about feelings. It's about preserving our family's history. The reunion will feature a presentation about the Anderson genealogy, displays of family heirlooms, discussions about inherited traits. Michelle would feel out of place." "The only one making Michelle feel out of place is you," Mom snapped. But Aunt Karen wasn't finished. "Besides, I've already discussed it with the reunion committee. We all agree, blood relatives only. It's simpler that way." The reunion committee consisted of Karen's daughter Jessica and 2 cousins who'd never dared disagree with her. I'd grown up with Jessica, shared clothes and secrets through our teenage years. Now she couldn't even meet my eyes across the table. "This is insane," Dad declared. "If Michelle's not welcome, none of us are going." "Don't be dramatic, James," Karen sighed. "You're the eldest son. You have to be there. And Maria's been helping Grandpa organize his old photographs for the family history display. You can't abandon your responsibilities just because Michelle's feelings are hurt." I found my voice then. "Don't worry about it, Dad. I wouldn't want to taint the precious Anderson bloodline with my adopted presence. Michelle." Mom reached for my hand, but I was already standing. "I mean it. Go to the reunion. Grandpa deserves to have his whole family there for his birthday. His real family, according to Aunt Karen." I left the house despite my parents' protests. Driving home to my apartment, I couldn't stop thinking about all the little moments over the years when Karen had subtly emphasized my outsider status. The Christmas she gave all the grandkids family heirloom jewelry except me. The way she'd introduced me as James and Maria's adopted daughter, rather than just her niece. But something else was bothering me, something about the way she'd been so insistent about blood relatives only. It seemed excessive, even for Karen, like she was afraid of something. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the family photos Mom had been organizing for Grandpa's birthday. One in particular stuck in my mind, a faded Polaroid from a family picnic the year before I was adopted. Something about Karen's expression in that photo, the way she was standing apart from the group. The next morning, I called in sick to my job at the architectural firm and drove to my parents' house. Mom was at work, but I had a key. The boxes of old photos were still spread across the dining room table. I found the picnic photo easily enough. Summer of 1994, 3 months before my birth parents chose the Andersons to adopt me. The whole family was there, lounging on checkered blankets, paper plates balanced on their laps. Everyone looked relaxed, happy. Except Karen. She stood at the edge of the frame, one hand pressed against her stomach, Her face turned away from the camera. She was wearing a loose sundress, unusual for someone who usually favored tailored clothes. And according to the date stamp, this was taken just 6 months before she married Uncle Steve in what Mom always called a rushed ceremony. A crazy idea started forming in my mind. I'd been born in January 1995. Karen married Steve in December 1994. The timing? But no, it couldn't be, could it? I took a photo of the Polaroid with my phone and opened my laptop. Over the next few hours, I dove deep into research. Hospital records from that time were mostly digitized now. It took some creative searching, but finally I found what I was looking for. A birth record from St. Mary's Hospital, January 15, 1995. My birth record. My birth mother's name was listed as Jane Doe, common in closed adoptions. But there was something else. A nurse's note, probably misfiled during digitization. Patient requested complete confidentiality. Family connection to hospital board member K.A. noted. K. Karen Anderson. My hands were shaking as I pulled up the website for a major DNA testing company. I'd always avoided these services before, respecting my birth parents' wish for privacy. But now, the test kit arrived 2 days later. As I swabbed my cheek, I thought about Karen's insistence on blood relatives only at the reunion, about all the years of subtle digs and careful distance, about how she'd never once asked me if I wanted to find my birth parents when most relatives had brought it up at least once. 6 weeks later, my phone pinged with a notification. Your DNA results are ready. And that's when everything I thought I knew about family began to unravel. The DNA results loaded slowly, each new section revealing another piece of an impossible puzzle. First came the ethnic breakdown, predominantly Northern European, just like the Andersons. Then the health markers, showing the same predisposition to high blood pressure that ran in the Anderson family. But it was the relative matches that made my heart stop. Close family match, Jessica Anderson, first cousin, estimated relationship, half-sibling. Below that, close family match, James Anderson, uncle, estimated relationship, father. My father wasn't my uncle. He was my father, biologically, which meant Karen was my mother. The runes started spinning. I grabbed my phone, hands shaking, and called Mom. Not my adoptive mom, my real mom, the only mom who'd ever mattered. Michelle? She answered on the first ring. What's wrong? I need you and Dad to come over. Now, and bring that photo album from 1994. They arrived 20 minutes later, finding me still staring at my laptop screen. Without a word, I turned it to face them. Oh God, Mom whispered, sinking onto my couch. Dad's face went pale. How long have you known? I asked. We didn't, Dad said quickly, not for certain. We suspected. Karen never confirmed it. Mom took my hand. When we were chosen for adoption, we were told it was a closed adoption through the hospital. But the social worker, she hinted that there was a family connection. We thought maybe a distant relative. Then at the hospital, I saw Karen in the maternity ward. She said she was visiting a friend, but she begged us not to tell anyone, Dad continued. Said it would destroy her life, her chances with Steve. We agreed because we wanted you so badly, and we were afraid if we didn't. She changed her mind, I finished. The pieces were falling into place. Karen's distance, her insistence on keeping me separate from real family events, her obsession with bloodlines and heritage. We should have told you. Mom was crying now. But as the years passed, it seemed kinder not to. You were ours, completely ours. The how didn't matter. I hugged them both, these parents who had chosen me, loved me, protected me, even from the truth. Does Grandpa know? Dad shook his head. I don't think so. Karen told everyone she was staying with a cousin in Maine during that time. I looked at the reunion invitation still sitting on my coffee table. The Anderson family grand reunion was starting in 3 days. Karen's carefully orchestrated celebration of family history was about to become something very different. I'm going, I announced. Michelle, Mom started. No, I'm tired of hiding who I am, of being made to feel less than. Karen wants to celebrate Anderson blood. Fine, let's celebrate it. The reunion was in full swing when we arrived at Grandpa's farm. Cars lined the long driveway, kids ran across the sprawling lawn, and the smell of barbecue filled the air. A large banner proclaimed Welcome Anderson Family, with Karen's perfect calligraphy. She spotted us immediately, her face darkening. "I thought we discussed this," she said, stepping forward to block our path. "This gathering is for blood relatives only," I finished. "Funny you should mention that, Aunt Karen. Or should I say, Mom?" The glass she was holding shattered on the porch steps. Around us, conversation stopped. Heads turned. "What did you just say?" Her voice was barely a whisper. I pulled out my phone, opening the DNA results. "Would you like to see the proof? The test shows everything: genetic markers, family connections. It's amazing what science can tell us about family trees these days." "You had no right," she hissed. "That information was private." "Private?" I laughed. "Like how you spent my entire life treating me like a dirty secret, making me feel like I didn't belong in my own family?" "Keep your voice down," she pleaded, looking around frantically. "Why? Isn't this what the reunion is about, celebrating Anderson family history?" "Well, here's a piece of history for everyone. 28 years ago, Karen Anderson had a baby. Instead of acknowledging her child, she gave it up in a closed adoption. But here's the twist. She arranged for her own brother to adopt the baby, then spent the next 3 decades pretending that child was a stranger." The porch had gone completely silent. Jessica stood frozen halfway down the steps, her face a mask of shock. "Is this true?" The question came from Grandpa Anderson, who had wheeled himself onto the porch during my speech. "Karen? Is she yours?" Karen's carefully maintained composure cracked. "Daddy, I was young, unmarried. It would have ruined everything with Steve." "So you gave your baby to James and Maria." Grandpa's voice was quiet. "And then spent years making that same child feel unwelcome in her own family." "I did what I had to do," Karen cried. "I gave her a good home, responsible parents. What more was I supposed to do?" "Love her," Jessica said suddenly. All heads turned to my half-sister. "You were supposed to love her, Mom. Like you loved me. Instead, you made me treat my own sister like an outsider." The next few hours were chaos. Family members took sides, arguments erupted, old secrets spilled out. Uncle Steve stormed off, shouting about decades of lies. Cousins who had followed Karen's lead in excluding me now looked ashamed. But something else happened too. Jessica hugged me, really hugged me, for the first time in years. "I always wanted a sister," she whispered. Grandpa insisted on hearing every detail of my life, proudly declaring that my architectural talent must come from his side of the family. Karen left early, refusing to participate in the spectacle, as she called it. But her departure felt like a weight lifting. For the first time, I could just be an Anderson. No qualifiers, no explanations needed. Later that evening, as fireflies danced across the farmhouse lawn, Grandpa called everyone together. "Family," he began, his voice strong despite his age, "is not about keeping secrets. It's not about blood or DNA or who has the right to belong. Family is about love. Messy, complicated, sometimes painful love." He turned to me. "Michelle, you've been an Anderson since the day James and Maria brought you home. Not because of whose blood you carry, but because of the love you've both given and received. I'm sorry it took us this long to say it properly. 1 year has passed since that reunion. Karen still won't speak to me, but I'm okay with that. Jessica and I meet for coffee weekly, making up for lost time. She's pregnant now. I'm going to be an aunt. Mom and Dad are still Mom and Dad. Finding out they're my biological aunt and uncle hasn't changed anything about our relationship. If anything, it's stronger for having the truth in the open." Last week, I found a package on my doorstep. Inside was an old jewelry box and a note in Grandpa's shaky handwriting. "This belonged to your grandmother. She would have wanted her granddaughter to have it, not because of blood, but because of the heart you've shown in forgiving this family's mistakes. Love, Grandpa." The necklace inside was the same one Karen had pointedly not given me all those Christmases ago. Now it sits in my jewelry box not as a symbol of bloodlines or heritage, but as a reminder that family is what we make it. Sometimes the truth hurts, sometimes it heals, and sometimes, like a DNA test that reveals both roots and wings, it sets us free to become who we were always meant to be, not just blood relatives, but true family. The restaurant business is brutal. Anyone who tells you different is either lying or hasn't been in it long enough. But what they don't tell you is that the deepest cuts don't come from competition or critics. They come from family. I'm David Chin, owner of the Golden Phoenix, San Francisco's oldest family-run Sichuan restaurant. Until last year, that family-run part included my younger brother Eric. Now he owns Dragon's Fire, our biggest competitor, using recipes he stole from our kitchen. Or so he thinks. Our story starts 3 generations ago, when our grandfather arrived in America with nothing but a small notebook of family recipes and a dream. He worked 18-hour days as a dishwasher, saving every penny until he could open a tiny storefront in Chinatown. The Golden Phoenix was born. That notebook became our family's most precious possession. Those weren't just recipes. They were stories, techniques passed down through generations, secrets that made our food unique. Especially our Phoenix sauce, a complex blend of 38 ingredients that took 3 days to prepare properly. Remember, Grandpa would say, showing me how to toast the spices just right. Anyone can follow a recipe. But understanding why each step matters, that's what makes it special. I soaked up every lesson, spending hours in the kitchen after school while Eric played video games. When Grandpa passed away, he left the restaurant to both of us. But everyone knew I'd be the one running it. Eric had never shown any interest in cooking. At least that's what I thought. Things changed after I took over as head chef. The Golden Phoenix thrived under my leadership. We earned write-ups in food magazines, got featured on cooking shows. Our Phoenix sauce became so popular we had to start bottling it for retail sale. Eric handled the business side, accounts, marketing, supplier contracts. It seemed perfect. He had an MBA and a head for numbers while I had the culinary skills. Together, we were bringing the restaurant into a new era. We should franchise, Eric suggested one day, watching me prepare a batch of Phoenix sauce. This sauce alone could make us millions. I shook my head. Grandpa never wanted that. He believed in quality over quantity. One restaurant, done perfectly. Grandpa's dead, Eric snapped. And his old-fashioned ideas are holding us back. That should have been my first warning sign. But he was my brother, and I trusted him. Then came the busy season leading up to Lunar New Year. We were swamped with orders, working double shifts. Eric offered to help with the sauce preparation. "You've got enough on your plate," he said. "I remember watching you and Grandpa make it. Let me handle this batch." I agreed, grateful for the help. That was my second mistake. 2 months later, Eric resigned, said he wanted to pursue other opportunities. I wished him well, even helped him pack up his office. A week after that, I saw the sign. "Coming soon, Dragon's Fire, authentic Sichuan cuisine." The location was just 10 blocks from us in the trendy new development area. The promotional materials promised traditional family recipes with a modern twist. And there, prominently featured in every advertisement, was their signature dish, Dragon's Special Sauce. I confronted Eric at his new location, still under construction. "How could you do this?" I demanded. "Those are our family's recipes." He just smiled, that smug little brother smile I'd seen 1,000 times. "I learned them just like you did. Besides, I've improved them, made them more marketable." Grandpa trusted us to protect his legacy. No, Grandpa trusted you. He always liked you better, always thought you were the true chef. Well, now we'll see who the better businessman is. I left feeling sick, not just because of the betrayal, but because I knew our recipes inside and out. If Eric was really using them, he could seriously damage our business. The next few months were tense. Dragon's Fire opened to great fanfare, backed by heavy marketing and social media influence. Their sauce wasn't exactly like ours. Eric had indeed modernized it, making it sweeter, less complex. But it was close enough to confuse customers. Our business started to suffer. Regular customers would tell us they tried Dragon's Fire, saying the food was similar but more modern. Some even suggested we should update our old-fashioned recipes. The staff could sense something was wrong. Mrs. Liu, our head server who'd worked for my grandfather, pulled me aside one day. "Your grandfather," she said in Mandarin, "he was wise about more than just cooking. Remember what he used to say about protecting family secrets?" I did remember. Grandpa had been almost paranoid about his recipe book, keeping it locked away except when teaching me. He'd also insisted I learn the recipes by heart, not just by reading. "A recipe written down can be stolen," he'd say, "but the one in your heart, that's yours forever." That's when I remembered something else. Something about the day Eric had offered to make the sauce. I went to the safe where we kept Grandpa's original recipe book. Next to it was the working cookbook we used in the kitchen, the one with our daily recipes, including the sauce. But they weren't the same recipe. Years ago, when I first took over the kitchen, I created a slightly modified version of the Phoenix sauce recipe for daily use. It was good, but not quite the same as Grandpa's original. The true recipe, with all its subtle details and secret steps, existed only in the original book and in my memory. Eric had stolen the working recipe, not the real one. I checked our security cameras, found footage of him photographing pages from the kitchen cookbook late at night. He thought he had our family's greatest secret, but he only had a copy of a copy. I was still processing this revelation when the announcement came. The city's biggest food festival was happening in 2 months. Both the Golden Phoenix and Dragon's Fire had been invited to participate. Eric's message was immediate. Hope you're ready for some real competition, big brother. After people taste my version of our sauce, the Golden Phoenix will be history. I looked at Grandpa's real recipe book, then at the festival invitation. Maybe it was time to show everyone the difference between a stolen recipe and a true family legacy. But I had no idea then just how far Eric would go to win, or what it would cost both of us to learn the true meaning of family loyalty. The morning of the food festival dawned clear and cool, perfect weather for serving spicy food. I arrived early with my team to set up our booth, watching as Eric's crew assembled an elaborate display across the festival ground. His setup was exactly what I'd expect, sleek, modern, with digital menu boards and trendy lighting. The Dragon's Fire logo glowed in neon red, while uniformed staff handed out promotional materials. Our booth was simpler. The Golden Phoenix, a traditional signage, the same one Grandpa had hand-painted decades ago. Mrs. Liu arranged our tables with the quiet efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. "Look at this," my sous chef Michael whispered, handing me one of Dragon's Fire's flyers. "They're calling it the original dragon sauce, a family recipe reimagined." I studied the glossy paper. Eric's marketing team had done their job well, creating a story about modernizing traditional recipes for contemporary tastes. There was even a photo of our grandfather's old restaurant, though Eric had carefully cropped out the Golden Phoenix sign. "Chef," Michael interrupted my thoughts, "we've got a problem." I followed his gaze to our prep area, the containers of pre-made Phoenix sauce, 3 days' worth that we carefully prepared, had been tampered with. The seals were broken, the contents obviously diluted. Security cameras would later show 2 of Eric's employees sneaking in during the early morning setup. But right then, all I knew was that we had 2 hours until the festival opened and no sauce. "What do we do?" Mrs. Liu asked, her face tight with worry. I looked at Grandpa's original recipe book, which I brought for inspiration rather than use. "We make it fresh, the real version. But it takes 3 days. Not if we do it Grandpa's original way." I opened the book to a page I'd memorized years ago. This was his competition recipe, meant to be made fresh when needed. It's harder, requires more skill, but it can be done in 2 hours. The next 120 minutes were a blur of precise chaos. Every burner going, spices being toasted in careful sequence, sauces reduced at exact temperatures. My team worked with the focused intensity of a surgical unit. The festival opened just as we finished the last batch. Already, I could see the difference. This sauce had a vibrancy, an aromatic complexity that even our regular version lacked. This was Grandpa's true recipe, the one he used to win the regional cooking championship in 1975. Eric sauntered over just before the judging began. "Cutting it a bit close, aren't you?" His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Hope nothing happened to your prep work." "Nothing I couldn't fix," I replied calmly. "How's your sauce doing?" "Must be hard getting it right when you're working from an incomplete recipe." His smile faltered slightly. "What are you talking about? I have the exact recipe you use in the restaurant." "Do you?" "Look closely at your sauce, Eric. Notice how it separates slightly? How the oil doesn't quite emulsify? That's because you're missing 3 key steps and 5 ingredients that aren't in the kitchen copy." Before he could respond, the judges arrived at his booth. I watched as they sampled his food, nodding appreciatively. Dragon's Fire's sauce was good, I had to admit that. Eric might be working from an incomplete recipe, but he refined it well. Then they came to our booth. The head judge, a renowned chef who'd known our grandfather, took one taste and closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were shining. "This," he said slowly, "this is Chen Xiaoping sauce. The real one. I haven't tasted it since the 75 competition." Word spread quickly through the festival. Soon our booth was swamped with people wanting to taste the original sauce. Even Eric's employees were sneaking over to try it. The final blow came during the award ceremony. Not only did we win Best Sauce, but the head judge made a speech about the importance of preserving true culinary traditions. "Anyone can make a good sauce," he said, echoing Grandpa's words. "But a great sauce carries history, carries soul." Today, I tasted a sauce that took me back 40 years, that reminded me why some traditions shouldn't be modernized, but cherished. Eric disappeared before I could talk to him. But later that night, as we were cleaning up, he returned. He looked defeated. "How long have you known?" he asked quietly. "About the recipe swap?" "Since you left." "About your employees tampering with our sauce today?" "Security cameras caught them." He sank into a chair. I thought I finally had a chance to prove myself. To show I could be as good as you. This was never about being as good as me, Eric. Grandpa didn't spend more time teaching me because he liked me better. He did it because I showed up. I wanted to learn. He never offered to teach me. Did you ever ask? The silence was heavy with decades of misunderstanding. "You know what Grandpa told me before he died?" I continued. "He said he hoped his 2 grandsons would each find their path in the family business. He knew you had skills I didn't, the business sense, the marketing instincts. He thought we complement each other. Instead, I tried to compete with you." Eric's voice was rough and nearly destroyed both businesses in the process. The next few weeks were challenging. The festival victory had boosted the Golden Phoenix's popularity, while Dragon's Fire struggled with comparisons to our original sauce. But something else happened too. Eric came to me with a proposal. Not a merger, but a collaboration. Dragon's Fire would become what he'd always been good at. A modern Asian fusion restaurant with its own unique identity. No more copying our recipes or trading on our family name. And maybe, he suggested hesitantly, we could do some pop-up events together. Traditional and modern, showing how the cuisine has evolved. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Today, both restaurants are thriving in their own ways. The Golden Phoenix still serves Grandpa's original recipes, while Dragon's Fire has found its voice in contemporary Asian cuisine. Eric and I have monthly dinner meetings, alternating between our restaurants, slowly rebuilding what we nearly lost. Last week, we hosted a special event, a recreation of Grandpa's 1975 championship dinner. Eric handled the business side, just like old times, while I cooked. As we watched the dining room fill with happy customers, I noticed something. On Eric's office wall, next to his MBA diploma and business awards, hung a familiar photo. It showed a young Chinese man standing proudly in front of a tiny storefront, holding a hand-painted sign. But this time, the Golden Phoenix sign wasn't cropped out. Sometimes the secret ingredient isn't in the recipe at all. Sometimes it's in knowing that family legacy isn't about who makes the better sauce, but about honoring the dreams of those who came before us, each in our own way. And sometimes, like the phoenix itself, what rises from the ashes of betrayal is stronger than what came before. They say grief shows people's true colors. In my case, it revealed that my mother-in-law's favorite color was the green of my late husband's life insurance check. I'm Madeline Carter, though my mother-in-law Patricia never lets me forget I was born Madeline Walsh, daughter of a high school teacher and a nurse. Not exactly the blue blood pedigree she'd hoped for when her only son brought me home. At 33, I found myself navigating 2 impossible situations, being a widow and dealing with Patricia's escalating demands for financial support. Andrew died 6 months ago in a skiing accident in Aspen. One moment he was at the top of the Black Diamond Run he conquered dozens of times before. The next he was gone. A hidden ice patch, a wrong turn, and our life together shattered like the poles they found scattered across the slope. The first few weeks after the accident were a blur. Patricia took charge of the funeral arrangements, steamrolling over my preferences with practiced ease. The Carters have always used Morrison Funeral Home, she'd declare, or Andrew would have wanted the mahogany casket. It's traditional. I was too numb to fight her then. Andrew had been my rock, my protector, my partner in everything since college. We'd met in the university library where I worked part-time, him researching for his business degree, me studying for my master's in library science. He didn't care that I came from a modest background or that my idea of fine dining was Olive Garden. He loved me for me. Patricia, however, had other ideas from the start. "At least you're pretty," she'd said during our first meeting, eyeing my department store dress with barely concealed disdain. "We can work with pretty. The rest, well, that's what finishing schools are for." But Andrew had stood firm against his mother's attempts to improve me. He loved my career as a children's librarian, supported my passion for literacy outreach programs, and told Patricia in no uncertain terms that if she couldn't accept me as I was, she wouldn't be part of our lives. That changed after his death. "Madeline, darling," Patricia cornered me after the funeral, her designer perfume almost suffocating in its intensity. "We need to discuss practical matters. The family's financial advisor will be meeting with us tomorrow." I tried to demur. I was exhausted, grieving, barely able to process that Andrew was gone. But Patricia insisted, and the next day I found myself in the oppressive mahogany-paneled office of Harrison Wells, who'd apparently managed Carter family money since God was young. "The life insurance payout is substantial," Harrison explained, shuffling papers importantly. Andrew was always prudent about such matters. $2 million, plus the house and his investment portfolio. Patricia's perfectly manicured hand found mine, squeezing with artificial comfort. "You see, darling, Andrew made sure you'd be taken care of. Now, about the family trust." That was the beginning. Somehow, during that meeting and the ones that followed, Patricia began positioning herself as the authority on how Andrew's money should be handled. She had opinions about everything: which investments to maintain, which ones to liquidate, how the insurance money should be allocated. "Andrew would have wanted to maintain the family standard of living," she'd say, sighing heavily. "The country club membership, the annual charity gala contributions, the summer house maintenance. Before I knew what was happening, I was paying for all of it. The property taxes on Patricia's mansion, the upkeep of the family's vacation home in Martha's Vineyard, her country club dues, her weekly salon appointments, all supposedly temporary measures while her own investments matured. It's what family does," she'd remind me whenever I questioned an expense. Andrew would be horrified to see his mother living like a common person. I allowed it because in those early days of grief, Patricia was my only connection to Andrew. She had his eyes, some of his mannerisms, and an endless supply of stories about his childhood. I was desperate to hold on to any piece of him I could. The breaking point came gradually. First, it was the comments about my job. "A librarian? Still," Patricia would say during our weekly dinners, which I also paid for. "Darling, you don't need to work anymore. It's almost embarrassing, a Carter widow sorting children's books." Then came the criticism of my home. The modest 4-bedroom Andrew and I had chosen together, preferring to live below our means and donate to causes we cared about. "You should move into something more appropriate," Patricia suggested. "The Ashworth estate is for sale. Just a small matter of $2 million. The same amount as my insurance payout. How convenient." But it was the Literacy Foundation that finally opened my eyes. Andrew and I had always dreamed of starting a children's literacy program in underserved communities. I'd begun the paperwork to establish it in his memory using part of the insurance money. "Oh, darling, no," Patricia interrupted my excited explanation during another expensive dinner. "We couldn't possibly have the Carter name associated with some inner-city charity. I've already committed those funds to renovating the country club's golf course. The board is expecting the donation next week." "You did what?" "Well, someone has to maintain the family's social obligations," she sniffed. "Really, Madeline, it's been 6 months. This middle-class mindset of yours needs to go." I went home that night and really looked at my bank statements for the first time since Andrew's death. The numbers were staggering. In 6 months, Patricia had maneuvered me into spending over $800,000 on various family obligations. That's when I called Andrew's old college roommate, Michael Jean, now a forensic accountant. "Something's not right," I told him. "Can you look into the Carter family finances? Discreetly?" Michael's investigation took 2 weeks. When he called me for a meeting, his typically jovial face was serious. "Maddie," he said, spreading documents across his desk, "you need to see this. The Carter family fortune, it's gone, has been for years. Patricia's been running a complex shell game, borrowing from one account to pay another, using your money to cover increasingly desperate schemes. But that wasn't the worst part. There's more," Michael said quietly. "That skiing accident that killed Andrew, I found some interesting insurance inquiries from Patricia in the weeks before it happened. Very interesting inquiries. Michael's words hit me like a physical blow. What kind of insurance inquiries? I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. He pulled out a stack of emails obtained through his investigation. 3 weeks before Andrew's accident, Patricia contacted 5 different insurance companies asking about policy payouts in cases of extreme sports accidents. She specifically asked about skiing fatalities. The room spun. I gripped the edge of Michael's desk, fighting waves of nausea. That doesn't necessarily mean. No, it doesn't, Michael agreed. But there's more. The week before the Aspen trip, she took out a substantial loan using the family's summer house as collateral. The due date? 1 day after the insurance payout was scheduled to clear. I remembered Patricia's insistence that Andrew go on that ski trip, even though he'd initially planned to skip it and stay home with me. How she'd upgraded him to the luxury lodge overlooking the most challenging runs. How she'd encouraged him to tackle the Black Diamond slope despite poor conditions. I've also found evidence of long-term financial fraud. Michael continued gently. Patricia's been running a Ponzi scheme through the Carter Family Foundation for years. She's been using charitable donations to cover personal expenses and pay off earlier investors. The more Michael revealed, the clearer the picture became. Patricia hadn't just been manipulating me. She'd been desperately trying to maintain her facade of wealth while everything crumbled around her. My insurance money had been a lifeline she grabbed with both hands. "What do you want to do?" Michael asked. I thought about Andrew, about his passion for justice and his belief in doing what's right. Everything, I said. I want to know everything. The next month was a crash course in forensic accounting and legal documentation. Michael connected me with Sarah Chen, a prosecutor specializing in financial crimes, and together we built a case that would shatter Patricia's carefully constructed world. We discovered that the Carter family fortune had been depleted long before I entered the picture, squandered by Patricia's father on bad investments and gambling debts. Patricia had spent decades maintaining the illusion of wealth through increasingly desperate means. The country club renovation donation she'd committed me to, part of a complex scheme to cover her embezzlement from the club's endowment fund. The summer house she used as collateral? She'd already mortgaged it 3 times under different subsidiaries she controlled. But the most damning evidence came from an unexpected source. Harrison Wells, the family's financial advisor, broke under questioning and revealed that Patricia had approached him about arranging an accident months before Andrew's death. She was desperate, he admitted to the investigators. The Ponzi scheme was collapsing, investors were asking questions. She needed a large cash infusion fast, and she knew about Andrew's life insurance policy. The final confrontation happened at the country club during the annual charity gala Patricia had insisted I fund. She was holding court in her usual spot by the champagne fountain when I arrived with Sarah Chen and 2 FBI agents. "Madeline, darling." Patricia's smile faltered slightly as she noticed my companions. "What's all this?" "Your game is over, Patricia," I said quietly. "We know everything. The fraud, the embezzlement, the insurance scam, and Andrew." Her champagne glass shattered on the marble floor. Around us, the social elite of Boston stopped their conversations, sensing drama unfolding. "How dare you?" Patricia hissed, but I could see the fear in her eyes. "After everything I've done for you?" "Everything you've done to me," I corrected, "and to Andrew. Did you even feel guilty sending your own son to his death for money?" The FBI agents stepped forward as Patricia tried to bolt. The arrest of Patricia Carter became the scandal of the season. Boston's premier socialite led away in handcuffs during her own charity gala. The aftermath was both swift and comprehensive. Patricia's financial crimes spanned decades and impacted hundreds of victims. The prosecutor offered her a deal, plead guilty to the financial charges, and they wouldn't pursue the murder investigation. She took it, facing 15 years in federal prison. The Carter Family Foundation was dissolved, its remaining assets used to repay victims. The summer house and Patricia's mansion were seized as part of the settlement. I used part of my remaining insurance money to purchase the mansion at auction, not to live in, but to convert into the Andrew Carter Memorial Library and Literacy Center. "The ultimate revenge," Michael joked as we toured the renovated building, turning her shrine to wealth into a public library. But it wasn't about revenge. It was about honoring who Andrew really was, not the society sham Patricia had tried to shape him into. The literacy foundation we dreamed of now operates from his childhood home, providing books and educational programs to thousands of children annually. I kept one room exactly as it was, Andrew's childhood library, where he'd spend hours reading while Patricia attended her social functions. It's my favorite place to host story times, watching children sprawl on the same window seat where my husband once dreamed of making a difference in the world. Patricia's country club friends all disappeared naturally. Amazing how quickly social status evaporates when the mansion becomes a library and the designer wardrobe is auctioned to repay fraud victims. She serves her sentence in a minimum security facility in Florida. Apparently, that's where disgraced socialites serve their time. Last month, I received a letter from her. Pages of excuses, justifications, and manipulations, ending with a request for money in her commissary account. I donated the letter to the library's true crime section and used the stamp to mail a book to one of our outreach programs. The irony doesn't escape me that Patricia's desperation for money ultimately cost her everything: her freedom, her status, and most tragically, her son. The Carter name no longer stands for old money and social status. Instead, it represents literacy, education, and opportunity for all. Yesterday, during our annual memorial reading of The Great Gatsby, Andrew's favorite book, a young girl asked me why there were no pictures of Mrs. Carter on the library walls. Because this place isn't about preserving wealth or status, I told her. It's about what Andrew really valued: learning, growing, and helping others. I've kept only one photo from my life with Patricia. It's from my wedding day, a candid shot of Andrew laughing at something while his mother looks on disapprovingly. I keep it in my office as a reminder that the trappings of wealth and status mean nothing compared to genuine love and integrity. The insurance money Patricia was so desperate to control. Most of it now funds scholarships and literacy programs. Every year, we help dozens of children discover the joy of reading in the same rooms where Patricia once plotted their exclusion from her social circle. Sometimes, late at night in Andrew's childhood library, I swear I can feel his presence. Not the society here Patricia tried to create, but the man who fought to be himself, who loved a librarian, who dreamed of making books accessible to everyone. That's the real Carter legacy, and no amount of designer clothes or country club memberships could ever match its worth. They say you never really know people until tragedy strikes. I learned this truth the hard way, flat on my back in a hospital bed, listening to my in-laws plot to cut off my medical care. The insurance policy is obviously fraudulent. Margaret Whitney's voice drifted through my partially open door. Emily must have forged Robert's signature after the accident. She always was crafty about money. I wanted to scream, to defend myself, but the ventilator tube made speech impossible. 3 weeks after the car accident that left me temporarily paralyzed, I could only lie there, trapped in an unresponsive body, as my husband's family tried to destroy me. The irony was bitter. Robert and I had gotten that life insurance policy together 5 years ago, right after our wedding. Just in case, he'd said, always the practical one. We need to protect each other. Now Robert was dead, killed instantly in the same accident that shattered my spine, and his family was trying to deny me the protection he'd insisted on. The policy pays out $5 million, William Whitney, my father-in-law, responded. That's Whitney family money. It should go to the foundation, not some gold digger who married into the family. Gold digger. I almost laughed, but it would have triggered the ventilator alarm. They'd conveniently forgotten that I was a successful neurosurgeon before marrying Robert, that I'd insisted on a prenup to protect my own assets. Dr. Anderson says she might recover partial mobility, Margaret continued. Imagine the drain on family resources, the rehabilitation costs alone. Not our problem, William dismissed. Once we prove the insurance policy is fake, she'll have to rely on her own means. Let her family deal with it. My family. Mom was a retired teacher, Dad a small-town accountant. They'd already sold their house to help with initial medical costs, believing the insurance would reimburse them. The Whitneys knew this. They'd watched my parents make the sacrifice, probably smirking behind their designer masks about the futility of it all. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that I wasn't as helpless as I appeared. The accident had taken my mobility, not my mind, and in the long hours lying here, forced to listen to their schemes, I'd been planning. They didn't know about the video Robert and I had made the day we signed the insurance papers. A silly thing at the time, we'd been playing with his new phone, recording random moments of our life together. For posterity, he joked, filming us both signing the documents, so our grandkids can see how boring adulting is. That video was still in our shared cloud storage, along with 5 years of other evidence of our life together, including emails discussing the policy, bank records showing premium payments, even photos from the insurance agent's office. They also didn't know that while I couldn't speak, I could communicate. My night nurse, Maria Garcia, had realized I was conscious and aware 3 days ago. She taught me to blink, once for yes, twice for no, a simple code that had become my lifeline. Mrs. Whitney, she'd asked one night, checking my vitals. Do you understand what's happening? Blink. Do you want me to help you? Blink. Are they lying about the insurance? Blink. Maria had become my secret ally, sneaking in her phone so I could blink out messages to my best friend, Claire Matthews, a medical malpractice attorney who'd fought the Whitneys before. The Whitneys thought they were being clever, visiting during regular staff changes when Maria wasn't around. They didn't realize every word they spoke was being recorded on the phone hidden under my pillow. Your parents called again. Margaret's voice pulled me back to the present. So persistent, asking about the insurance payout, as if we'd let them take advantage. Take advantage? My parents, who'd mortgaged their future to save my life while the Whitneys plotted to cut off my care. I felt the familiar rage build, but forced myself to remain calm. The monitors would betray any spike in my vital signs. I've spoken to Harrison, William said smugly. He's prepared to testify that Robert never signed any such policy. As his personal accountant for 20 years, his word carries weight. Of course Harrison would lie for them. The Whitneys probably own him, just like they own half the town's elite. But they didn't own Maria, who was silently recording every word while pretending to check equipment in the corner. They didn't own Claire, who was already building a case that would destroy their carefully constructed facade. And they certainly didn't own me. I lay there, letting them plot, letting them think they were in control. They had no idea that their own words would be their undoing. Later that night, Maria helped me communicate with Claire through blinks and a letterboard. Check Roby Ortiz LAPTOP, I spelled out slowly. Hidden FOLDR. More pair off. Got it, Claire replied via speakerphone. The insurance company's already investigating the Whitneys' claim of fraud. These recordings will help. And Emily, there's something else you should know. I blinked my acknowledgement. Robert left a letter with my office. Said to open it if anything happened to him. He knew his family might try something like this. My eyes filled with tears. Even after death, Robert was protecting me. He documented everything, Claire continued. Years of their financial manipulation, threats against previous partners, suspicious accidents involving people who opposed them. He built a case, just in case. Just in case they tried to destroy someone he loved. Oh, Robert. Even in our happiest moments, he'd known what his family was capable of. The next few days were a careful dance of preparation. While the Whitneys pushed their fraud narrative, Claire gathered evidence. Maria recorded their conversations. My doctors documented my awareness and decision-making capacity. William and Margaret grew bolder, threatening to have me transferred to a more suitable facility. A nice way of saying a place where I'd receive minimal care. They didn't realize I could hear their whispered conversations about care withdrawal and natural progression. They didn't know that every threatening word, every manipulative move was being documented. Most importantly, they didn't know that tomorrow, when they arrived with their lawyers to begin transfer proceedings, they would face not a helpless, voiceless victim, but a team ready to expose decades of Whitney family corruption. The ventilator might have silenced my voice, but it hadn't silenced the truth. And tomorrow, they would learn exactly what kind of fighter they were dealing with. You really should sign these transfer papers, Emily. Margaret Whitney's voice drooped false concern as she held up the documents. The facility we've chosen specializes in long-term care cases. I lay in my hospital bed, newly freed from the ventilator but still mostly paralyzed, watching my in-laws prepare to strip away my last defenses. The family's lawyers hovered nearby, all expensive suits and predatory smiles. They'd chosen their moment carefully, or so they thought. A Friday afternoon, regular staff away, witnesses minimal. The perfect time to pressure a vulnerable patient. What they didn't know was that every person in this room was exactly where I needed them to be. Mrs. Whitney, My voice was raspy from weeks of intubation. Before we discuss any transfers, I believe my attorney has some documents to share. Claire stepped out of the corner where she'd been quietly observing. The Whitneys' faces shifted from smug certainty to wary confusion. What attorney? William demanded. We weren't notified. Just like I wasn't notified when you tried to invalidate my insurance policy? I met his eyes steadily, when you accused me of fraud while I lay here unable to defend myself. Margaret's perfectly maintained composure cracked slightly. We don't know what you think you heard. Oh, I heard everything. I nodded to Maria, who pulled out her phone and pressed play. Their own voices filled the room, discussing their plans to cut off my care, their schemes to deny the insurance, their dismissal of my parents' sacrifice. Illegally recorded, one of their lawyers started, but Claire was already connecting her laptop to the room's large monitor. Then let's watch something recorded with full consent, she said pleasantly, from 5 years ago. The video played crystal clear, Robert and I at the insurance office, laughing as we signed the papers. Got to protect my brilliant surgeon wife, he said to the camera. Though with her salary, she probably doesn't need it. The policy was Robert's idea, I said into the stunned silence. He wanted to make sure I was taken care of. Just like he wanted to make sure I had evidence of your family's other activities. William's face darkened. What are you talking about? Claire opened Robert's letter on the screen. Your son was thorough, Mr. Whitney. He documented everything. The threatened partners, the suspicious accidents, the financial manipulation. He knew exactly what you were capable of. You're bluffing. Margaret's voice shook slightly. Actually, Dr. Anderson stepped into the room. We have quite a comprehensive record, including your recent discussions about withdrawing care and forcing transfers against medical advice. The hospital's legal team followed him in, along with 2 police detectives. Insurance fraud is a serious crime, one detective noted. So it was conspiracy to deny medical care. And when we started investigating, we found some very interesting patterns in the Whitney family history. What followed was like watching a carefully built house of cards collapse. The Whitneys' lawyers, sensing disaster, began distancing themselves. William and Margaret's threats turned to pleas, then to desperate negotiations. But I wasn't interested in deals. Here's what's going to happen. I said my doctor's authority returning despite my weakened state. The insurance policy will be honored, not just for me, but for my parents' reimbursement. The Whitney Foundation will establish a fund for spinal cord injury research, and you will never again try to deny someone medical care for your own financial gain. Or, Claire added pleasantly, we can let the police and insurance investigators continue their work. I'm sure the other families you've threatened over the years would be interested in coming forward. The Whitneys left in defeat, their lawyers already discussing damage control. But my battle wasn't over, it was just shifting focus. The next 6 months were a brutal regimen of physical therapy, learning to breathe fully again, fighting to regain movement in my limbs. Small victories celebrated like major triumphs. My parents moved into our house, my house now, to help with my recovery. The insurance money meant they could retire properly, focus on being supportive rather than worried about finances. Maria stayed on as my private nurse, her recorded evidence earning her a substantial whistleblower reward from the insurance company's fraud investigation. Claire's exposure of the Whitney family's practices led to more victims coming forward. The foundation's corrupt practices were revealed, leading to a complete restructuring under independent oversight. Through it all, I kept pushing forward. The prognosis had been uncertain, but I was determined to beat it. 1 year after the accident, I stood again for the first time. Shaky, supported by parallel bars, but standing. 2 years out, I walked into my first post-accident surgery. Not to operate, I wasn't ready for that level of fine motor control, but to consult. My colleagues welcomed me back with respect rather than pity. Dr. Whitney, my resident asked during rounds, should we use your research protocol for this spinal case? Dr. Carter, I corrected, having reclaimed my maiden name. And yes, but with a modification I developed during my own recovery. I turned my experience into expertise, publishing papers on spinal cord injury treatment from a uniquely informed perspective. The Whitney Foundation's mandatory research funding had actually advanced the field significantly. 3 years after the accident that was meant to break me, I stood at a podium, delivering the keynote address at a neurosurgery conference. Medical catastrophes show us who people really are, I told the audience, both the victims and those around them. We can choose to be broken by betrayal, or we can choose to build something better from the experience. My parents sat in the front row, beaming with pride. Maria and Claire were there too, the friends who'd become family. Even some of Robert's distant relatives who'd supported me against the Whitneys attended. Later that evening, I visited Robert's grave, placing fresh flowers beside the headstone. You knew, didn't you? I said softly. What they might do. That's why you left all that evidence, made that video, protected me even knowing you might not be here. The evening breeze stirred the flowers, carrying the scent of approaching spring. I did more than survive, I told him. I changed things, made it harder for them to hurt anyone else, built something positive from all the pain. Walking back to my car, slowly but independently, I thought about all the ways life tests us. How tragedy reveals both the worst and best in people. How sometimes the greatest strength comes not from fighting back, but from moving forward with purpose. The Whitneys had tried to silence me, thinking my paralyzed body meant a paralyzed spirit. Instead, they'd unleash a force for change they never expected. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting better, in every possible way. The last thing my husband ever said to me was about wine. Maria, Nathan whispered, his voice weak but still carrying that sommelier's precision. Don't forget to check the 82 Bordeaux. It's time. Then he closed his eyes for the final time, leaving me with a cryptic message and a heart full of questions. I'm Maria Delacroix. Though I was born Maria Castillo before marrying into one of California's most prestigious winemaking families. For 8 years, I'd helped run Delacroix vineyards alongside my husband Nathan, turning a respected family vineyard into one of Napa Valley's most innovative wineries. Our experimental blends had won international awards, and our traditional vintages were sought after by collectors worldwide. But none of that mattered to my mother-in-law, Patricia Delacroix, who had never approved of her son marrying the help. Her words for the viticulture expert who'd originally been hired to modernize their grape production. He's gone. Patricia's voice cut through my grief 2 days after Nathan's funeral. She stood in the doorway of the vineyard house Nathan and I had shared, impeccable in designer black, not a silver hair out of place. And it's time for you to leave. This is my home, I protested, still numb from burying my husband. Nathan and I built this together. Nathan built nothing, she snapped. This vineyard has been in the Delacroix family for 4 generations. You were just a temporary distraction. The property reverts to the family trust now, and you have no claim to it. She handed me an eviction notice already prepared by her lawyers. You have 48 hours to vacate the premises. I stood in our bedroom, my bedroom now, surrounded by 8 years of shared life. Photos from our wedding in the vineyard, Nathan beaming as we toasted with our first award-winning blend. The antique wine opener he'd given me on our first anniversary. The soil samples we'd been studying for a new organic growing section. Don't forget to check the 82 Bordeaux. Nathan's last words echoed in my mind as I mechanically packed my clothes. The 82 Bordeaux. We had several bottles in the cellar, part of the original Delacroix collection that Nathan's grandfather had started. Nathan had always been protective of that vintage, keeping it in a special section of the temperature-controlled cellar. Patricia's voice carried up from downstairs, where she was instructing the estate manager on returning things to proper order. I had less than 2 hours before she would have security escort me out, just enough time to check the cellar one last time. The cellar had always been my favorite place on the property, cool stone walls lined with history in bottle form. The subtle symphony of climate control systems maintaining perfect temperature and humidity. Nathan and I had spent countless hours here, discussing vintages, planning new blends, dreaming about the future. The 82 Bordeaux section was in the back, behind a heavy wooden door that Nathan had installed himself. Family treasures need extra protection, he'd said with that mysterious smile of his. I'd always assumed he meant the wine. The door creaked open, revealing racks of carefully preserved bottles. But something was different. The far wall, usually shrouded in shadow, showed a hairline crack I'd never noticed before. When I touched it, the section moved slightly. My hands trembled as I pressed harder. The wall panel swung inward, revealing a small room beyond. Motion-activated lights flickered on, illuminating not wine racks, but filing cabinets and a desk covered in documents. The first file I opened made my heart stop. It was a deed, the original deed to Delacroix Vineyards. But the name on it wasn't Delacroix. It was Martinez, dated 1947. More documents told a story that Patricia had probably thought was buried forever. The vineyard hadn't been in the Delacroix family for 4 generations. It had belonged to the Martinez family, who had worked this land since California was still part of Mexico. The Delacroix family had acquired it through a combination of predatory loans and forged documents during a period when Hispanic landowners were being systematically dispossessed. Nathan's grandfather hadn't started the vineyard, he'd stolen it. And Nathan had discovered the truth. A leather-bound journal caught my eye. I recognized Nathan's handwriting. My grandfather's sins weigh heavily on me. The Martinez family lost everything, their land, their legacy, their place in the valley. When I discovered the truth in these documents, I knew I had to make it right. Maria doesn't know yet, but her grandmother's maiden name was Martinez. She's the last living heir of the original owners. I've updated my will to return the vineyard to its rightful family through her. Mother will fight it, of course. But there's more. The journal entry was dated just 3 weeks ago. My hands shook as I read on. Discovering that Nathan had spent years secretly documenting everything. The real history of the vineyard. The truth about the family trust. The legal framework for restoring the property to its rightful heirs. Maria, Patricia's voice echoed from upstairs. Security will be here in 20 minutes. I quickly photographed every document with my phone, then reached for the 82 Bordeaux that Nathan had been so insistent about. Behind the bottle was a small key taped to the wall, with a note in Nathan's writing, Safe Deposit Box 247, Valley First Bank. Everything you need is there. As I carefully replaced everything and slipped out of the secret room, I heard footsteps on the cellar stairs. Patricia appeared, flanked by 2 security guards. Still trying to steal our wine? She asked coldly. I clutched my phone, now holding the explosive truth about her family's legacy. Just saying goodbye to the cellar. I'm leaving now. Good, she gestured to the guards. Escort her out. And make sure she doesn't take anything that belongs to the Delacroix family. If she only knew. Valley First Bank's safety deposit box 247 contained exactly what Nathan had promised. Everything I needed. A properly executed will, dated just 2 weeks before his death. USB drives containing years of research into the Martinez family's claim to the land. Most importantly, a letter explaining why he kept this secret even from me. My dearest Maria, he'd written, if you're reading this, then I ran out of time to tell you in person. When I discovered that you were unknowingly the heir to the land my family stole, I knew I had to make things right. But Mother's network of influence in the valley runs deep. I needed to ensure everything was legally bulletproof before revealing the truth. The irony of falling in love with and marrying the very person to whom we owed restitution wasn't lost on me. Perhaps fate has a sense of justice after all. I took the documents to Elena Torres, a lawyer friend who had helped Hispanic families recover stolen property before. Her eyes widened as she reviewed Nathan's research. This is incredible, she said, spreading the papers across her desk. The original deed, proof of the fraudulent transfer, even documentation of similar land thefts throughout the valley. Your husband was thorough. Will it hold up in court? Elena smiled. Better than that. It won't have to. She held up Nathan's will. This is ironclad. He left everything to you, not just his share of the vineyard, but his majority stake in the family corporation that owns it. Patricia can contest it, but she'll lose. She'll try anyway, I said, remembering my mother-in-law's cold determination. Oh, I count on it. Elena's smile turned predatory. Because when she does, all of this becomes public record. Every dirty detail about how her family built their fortune on stolen land. We didn't have to wait long. The next morning, Patricia's lawyers filed an emergency injunction to block the execution of Nathan's will. Their argument was predictable. I had unduly influenced Nathan, taken advantage of his illness, wasn't really his wife in any meaningful sense. What they didn't expect was our counterfiling, a detailed history of the Delacroix vineyard's true ownership, complete with documentation that would spark a PR nightmare for the valley's elite families. The hearing was set for Friday morning. Patricia arrived at the courthouse looking confident, flanked by 3 expensive lawyers. Her expression when she saw me sitting with Elena could have curdled wine. "This is a simple matter, Your Honor," her lead attorney began. "Mrs. Delacroix contests the validity of a will made under suspicious circumstances." "If I may, Your Honor," Elena interrupted, rising. "Before we proceed, I'd like to submit some additional context about the property in question." She began distributing copies of Nathan's research. I watched Patricia's face as she read the first page. She went pale, then red, then pale again. Her lawyers huddled around her, whispering urgently. "Your Honor," Elena continued, "what we have here is more than a simple will contest. This is about historical justice. The property Mrs. Delacroix claims as her family's heritage was actually stolen from my client's ancestors through documented fraud." The judge, an older woman with shrewd eyes, studied the documents carefully. "These are serious allegations, Counselor." "They're lies," Patricia burst out. "That land has been in our family for generations." "Yes," I said quietly, speaking for the first time. "But before that, it was in my family for generations. Nathan discovered the truth and spent years documenting everything. That's why he left it to me, not just because I was his wife, but because it was the right thing to do." I pulled out one final document, a photograph from my grandmother's collection that Nathan had found during his research. It showed the Martinez family in front of the original vineyard house, dated 1946. The woman in the center could have been my twin. "Your Honor," Elena said, "we're prepared to present extensive evidence of the historical land theft, including similar cases involving other prominent Valley families. Or," she glanced at Patricia's lawyers, "we can discuss a settlement that allows for a quiet transfer of ownership while preserving everyone's dignity." The message was clear. Fight this, and every privileged family in the Valley would be exposed. Patricia's lawyers requested a recess. They returned 30 minutes later, ashen-faced. "We're prepared to withdraw our objection to the will," the lead attorney announced. "Mrs. Delacroix Sr. will also resign her position on the corporation's board, effective immediately." The judge nodded, unsurprised. "Will that be satisfactory, Mrs. Delacroix?" she asked me. I thought about Nathan, about his years of secret research, about his determination to right a historical wrong while protecting both families' dignity. "Yes, Your Honor, with one condition." I turned to Patricia. "The vineyard's history, the true history, should be acknowledged, not hidden away in a secret room." 2 months later, I stood in the vineyard's tasting room, now renovated to include a historical display. Photos of both families, Martinez and Delacroix, shared the walls. The story of the land, both painful and redemptive, was there for all to see. The 82 Bordeaux had been moved from its hidden room to a place of honor. Nathan's note beside it told visitors its significance. "This wine represents both the darkness and light of our valley's history. Made from grapes grown on stolen land, it also became the key to restoring truth and justice. We honor both families' contributions to this vineyard's legacy." Patricia hadn't returned to the vineyard since the hearing, but she'd sent a letter that surprised me with its humanity. "Maria, I spent my life protecting a lie I didn't even know was a lie. Nathan was braver than I ever was. He faced the truth and tried to make it right. The vineyard is where it belongs now. Make it something both families can be proud of." I did. The first vintage produced under my full ownership was a blend I called Dos Familias, 2 families. The label featured both the Martinez and Delacroix family crests, with a simple statement, "Truth, like wine, gets better with age." It won Best in Show at the Valley's annual wine competition. The secret room behind the 82 Bordeaux is still there, but it's not secret anymore. It's a small museum now, documenting the Valley's complex history of land ownership and the families who worked this soil. School groups visit to learn about both the difficulties of the past and the possibilities for reconciliation. Sometimes, late in the evening, I sit in what used to be Nathan's office, looking out over the vines our families have tended for generations. The land doesn't care who owns it legally. It only knows the hands that work it, the love that tends it, the truth that flows through it like wine through veins. Nathan's last words make perfect sense now. The 82 Bordeaux wasn't just wine. It was a key to unlocking truth, a bridge between past and future, a testament to the fact that sometimes the best way to honor a legacy is to correct it. This year's harvest promises to be exceptional. The grapes seem to know they're growing in soil finally free from secrets, nourished by truth as much as rain. When the wine is ready, it will tell a story not just of one family or another, but of justice, love, and the courage to make things right. And somewhere, I like to think, Nathan is smiling.